Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wondered if God is real or a part of each one of us, then do we have the Mother of the Unseen World show for you. Today I'll be talking with Mark Matousek, the author of 2 acclaimed memoirs, former editor at Interview Magazine, featured blogger for Psychologist Today and Huff Post, and the author of a mesmerizing new book, Mother of the Unseen World. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about the mystery of Mother Meera and what it means for us. That, plus we'll talk about avatars and guru phobia, running schools without accountants, blue flower moments and stealing roses, what on earth is a Dharma bum, and what in the world the difference between ferry boats and ocean liners has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Mark. Are you ready to shine?
I am, Michael. It's good to see you today.
It is so good to see you too, and a mighty woohoo for having you here on the show.
Thank you, my friend.
So before we dive right into things, did you always grow up spiritual?
No, I didn't. I grew up in an atheist household of fallen Jews who never went to temple. It was a dog-eat-dog world. There was no sense of God whatsoever. But I always had a yearning for more because I was a questioning child. So I would ask myself things about death, life after death, and if there was something mysterious, invisible that I couldn't see. But it was not supported at all in the family that I grew up in. So then it went sort of underground for the next 20 years and came up when I was right before I turned 30.
When it was underground, how did you feel at that time about people labeled as gurus?
I never thought about them. I was too focused on being an alpha male yuppie in New York City and climbing the corporate ladder in publishing and really making my name in the world. That's what I was thinking about. I wasn't giving any thought whatsoever to gurus. The guru I was worshiping was the guru of success.
And how is that going? How is your guru going?
It was not going well at all. I really had a kind of a spiritual breakdown in my late 20s. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I was profoundly depressed. I had a great job. I had a good life on the outside, but inwardly, soul-wise, I was very, very unhappy, and it got worse and worse. And I didn't know what was going on until someone came into my life and said, "You're having a spiritual crisis." And that completely reframed it for me. And I quit my job. I went with him to India. I started studying meditation. And thank God I met Mother Meera at that time, which really turned my head around.
So, and we're going to dive into Mother Meera in a moment. But how is your health doing too? Because the spiritual crisis and health crisis are often synonymous.
Yes, it's true. And the reason that I cracked up in my late 20s is that I got a diagnosis with what was believed to be a fatal disease. And so I thought my number was up, and I didn't know anything about who I was or why I was here or what any of this meant. And I felt it was insult to injury to die ignorant. If I was going to die, at least I wanted to have some sense of why I had been here. So that really did lead to my spiritual seeking. I don't think I would have gotten to it, at least not that early on the trajectory I was on, had it not been for the threat of checking out.
So it's amazing. I don't want to sound callous and say, well, everything happens for a reason, and so you should cherish the moments when you're at your most miserable. However, if we can step back, just like the lotus blossoming, no mud, no lotus, these things can have beyond a silver lining to them.
Oh, there's no question about it. I used to say that AIDS saved my life, and people would say, "What are you talking about? Are you deluded? I mean, are you just some Pollyanna whitewashing a terrible experience?" But it was actually so. It saved my inner life because inwardly I felt like I was dying, even though my body, I never actually got sick. And there was the threat of getting sick. So I sort of had the best of both worlds. I had the threat, which got me out of my life and onto the path, but I didn't actually get sick. So it was a huge blessing for me that I got to walk that middle way.
Well, there's such a beautiful expression. You may have used it as well, which is to die while you're still alive.
Completely. That's what it's about, isn't it? I mean, I just gave a talk the other day, and one of the 4 practices I suggested for a daily bringing enlightenment into the ordinary moments of your life was to practice dying. And I said, to the ego, this sounds very, very unappealing, but to the spirit, it's absolute liberation. You know, if you live, Anandamoy Ma, a great Indian saint, said that we should live like a bird on a dry twig, knowing that the twig is going to break and that when it does, we can fly away. But that we're aware of that and holding that on our shoulder, so to speak, is an important part of being awake, don't you think?
Absolutely. Well, it reminds me of the story of an alcoholic or an addict who says, I will change if things get too bad. I will change when this, I will change when that. And we all hold on so tightly to life, to our jobs, to our goals, to our this, to our that, knowing if we came to the end of our days, we'd change, but we're unable to change until that threat of imminent demise comes about.
Yes, and that's why all the teachers say that we're living our lives in a trance, because the fact is our imminent demises are imminent all the time. So the fact that we can compartmentalize to that degree and deny our own mortality to that degree shows you the brilliance of the human mind. But if you look at reality, the fact is death is absolutely here at every moment. So we shouldn't need a diagnosis to have that kind of a wake up. But we seem to. We're very stubborn animals, and we will live in denial as long as we possibly can. So the blessing is when you get a knock on your door, or that your tree gets shaken, but it doesn't get torn down. That's what happened with me. The tree got shaken, but it didn't actually get ripped apart.
Well, that's good. Speaking from my titanium parts of the having to rebuild of the tree, you got the kind, gentle, easy, good version of it, as I call it. So it's interesting. I always like to say that if we were all born like a loaf of bread with an expiration date across our foreheads, just how differently would we lead our lives if we knew exactly when we were checking out?
That's a great question, and it's a complex question. You could say something kind of facile like, "Oh, everyone would live their best life," but I don't actually think that that's true. I think that there are people who, knowing that they were going to die young, would just go sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and eat, drink, and be merry. I think it depends on the soul. I mean, seekers are a minority. It's not that all human beings don't have the hunger for God or the divine, but very tiny, tiny fraction of us are actually drawn to it, pulled to it. So I'm not that optimistic that if people had their expiration date, they would automatically go to the higher, freer, more awakened place. Who knows?
I was watching a little bit of a documentary this morning on, I think it's called the Barkley Race. It's this crazy ultra running race hidden in the hills of Tennessee, where every year almost nobody finishes it. It's actually a very, in a sense, has a Buddhist tenet to it. You don't even know what time the race is going to start. Somewhere in a 16-hour period, a conch horn will be blown, and you'll have 1 hour to start the race. And they say it's about living in that moment and the ambiguity of the moment. And somebody was talking about, it was quite profound, but not in the way that he meant it. But he was talking about how the importance of getting uncomfortable can be for shaking us up in life.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. Well, we go to sleep. We tend to be kind of sleepwalkers in our own lives. We get very comfortable and stuck in our ways. And I think of it as being kind of upholstered. I feel like a lot of us go through our lives upholstered with our routines, our comforts, our habits. And once the upholstery gets pulled off, that's when you come into contact with your existence in a whole different way. But the mind, we want to protect ourselves from the full catastrophe, as John Kabat-Zinn calls it. And so we live these upholstered lives. And some of us have these experiences that rip us to shreds, which doesn't always feel good, but spiritually speaking, it's the best possible outcome.
So let's talk about peeling the Velcro back, or the upholstery of your life, and go to August 2nd, 1984.
There was a day that really did change my life. I had quit my job. I was a magazine editor in New York. My friend Andrew Harvey had invited me to India. He's a spiritual writer. I knew nothing about spirituality whatsoever. I was an agnostic, as I was saying earlier, no religion whatsoever. And on the way to India, he wanted to stop in Germany. He said he wanted to see a friend of his in Germany, but he didn't tell me anything about it. And really, it's a testament to how kind of fried I was that I didn't ask any questions. I was just kind of going along.
Yeah.
He was from India. I was going along with him. So we walked. We got to this small village in about an hour and a half outside of Frankfurt. And the guy who drove us told us that darshan had already begun. And I didn't know what darshan was, but he just said, don't make any noise when you go in the house. We walk in this very modest little stucco house in one of these immaculate little German villages. And I walked in, and the silence was completely deafening. It was, my mind started, I heard this buzzing in my ears, and I looked at my friend Andrew, and he nodded at me and smiled, so we were hearing it. I went up the stairs of this tiny little house, and I looked over the banister, and I saw this little Indian woman sitting in a chair, and there was a child in front of her on the floor, kneeling with his head like this, and she was holding his head in her hands like that. And I was mesmerized. I could never seen anything like it. I really felt like I was in the presence of something other. You know, when you like you smell something, you taste something, it's just different. It was a different flavor of experience. She let go of the child's head. She looked into his eyes for a moment, and then she looked down. The child went away, and the next person came up. And I sat down on the stairs. I shut my eyes, and I went into a complete trance. And I am the most skeptical person on earth. I had no expectation. I went into a trance. The woman appeared in my inner vision. She had claws. She was clawing at my inside. It was incredible. And then I opened my eyes, and it was time for me to go up. When she actually touched my head and looked into my eyes, I didn't feel anything at all. But that night, I ended up having a purging experience, a major purging experience. And I felt like this grief. I had always had a real grief in my center, and I felt like nothing quite got to it. No therapy didn't get to it. It just opened up. And I wept and wept and wept. I felt like I was weeping for a lifetime. But I tell you, Michael, at the end of that, I felt like I had truly come through an initiation, a real initiation, because I had no preconception of who she was, that almost everyone has experiences like this around. I knew nothing. And that to me was a testament to the authenticity of it, because I was such a doubter. If I had had any sense that it could have been my imagination, I might have palmed it off on that, but it wasn't. It was the power of the metaphysical pulling me out of this world I thought I knew, into a vision of something more. I can't begin to tell you what that was. I'm far from enlightened, but I absolutely saw something I had never seen before and felt things I had never seen before.
How did as you started to come back to earth, so to speak, how did the mind handle this?
Well, my mind immediately started to create excuses and reasons why it wasn't so. That I was burned out, I was grieving, I was tired, whatever. And I said to her inwardly, I had a kind of prayer before we left for India, and that was, if you're real, show me. If you're real, show me. I need to be shown. And what has happened for me over the last 30 years is that she has continued to blow my mind whenever I see her, and to remind me of what is possible in human evolution. That someone asked me last night at an event, if we all have the possibility to be a Mother Meera. No, the fact is, some people come in with the veil very thin. She's always been connected to God, never forgotten that connection. But we all have the potential. That's the reason that we go to these people, is that we do have the potential. Otherwise, they would just be kind of a freak of nature. But it's because they are reflecting what's possible for us that it's so extremely moving.
What is the possibility? This is a huge question, and then I want to dive into Mother Meera and her life. But you say it shows you what's possible in human evolution. What is possible?
Well, what is possible, what I have experienced, is that it is absolutely possible to live in the unknowing, to live in the not known, to live in mystery. The Baal Shem Tov, who was an 18th century Hasidic master, compared the moment when he had a spiritual awakening turning around and stepping out the back door of his own mind.
Yeah.
And that's really how it felt for me when I first met Mother Meera. I thought I knew the world. I thought I understood what reality was. Suddenly, you get a glimpse of something, and you realize you don't know a thing. You don't know a thing. So it's exciting, and
Mm-hmm.
it's also kind of scary, because you think, what is the potential? So what I know is that we are on a scale of evolution
Mm-hmm.
as beings. People like Mother Meera, the spiritual geniuses, and there are others in the world today, come into life farther along that particular spectrum, but we're all on that spectrum as well, and that they're here to quicken our awakening. That's what they're here to do. They're not here to give us rules and regulations or to take our money or demand loyalty. All they're here to do is to communicate love and that power. Mother Meera talks about it as the Paramatman light, which is the God light, that she gives to all people who come to her, regardless of their backgrounds, for the sole purpose of bringing them closer to God. There are no rules, there are no regulations. It really is the mother's way. It's inclusive, and it's. She says that that happiness is the foundation of that joy is the foundation of spiritual life. How many of us think that? We tend to think that it's through suffering that we awaken, and she suggests that actually joy is the final awakener. And the Buddha, the same thing. The Buddha realized that he had forgotten about joy in all of his renunciation and asceticism. He had forgotten about joy, and that's what really gave us the Dharma. Mother Meera is saying something similar.
Yeah, it sounds like what Mother Meera was saying is that the suffering is man-made, and I think actually the Buddha would go on to say the suffering part, that's optional.
Yes, yes. Although he said that we all do it, so how optional? That comes down to free will. Is it optional? Is it not optional? I don't know. We do it. The mind does it. We create stories, and the stories create the suffering.
Yeah. So let's go and let's talk about Mother Meera, how she I don't know if came about is the right term, but she incarnated here. What were some of the highlights? What was her early childhood like, for instance?
Fascinating. She was born Kamala Reddy in a little village in South India. She was an illiterate farm girl, dirt poor. Her parents were itinerant farmers. At the age of 3, rather, she started to have experiences where she would talk about different lights coming to her as teaching her things. She would fall into these strange kind of trances. At the age of 6, she fell unconscious for an entire day, and her family was terrified. And she later said that this was her first experience of full satori, which, as you know, is something that people practice for lifetimes to attain. And it had happened to her spontaneously at the age of 6. 2 years later, she was sent to work as a servant in the house next door. That was run by a man who just by accident happened to be someone who had dreams since childhood of helping a young girl and had a path following the divine feminine, and was living at the Aurobindo ashram in Pondicherry, and was loved sweet mother who was the head of the Aurobindo ashram. Anyway, he came back to his house after he, for other reasons, met Kamala Reddy, was struck instantly by the fact that she was that little girl that he had heard about, and she started to tell him her experiences. And that was the first time she actually opened up and talked about the education of an avatar and what happens. And it's mind-blowing. And both can read the book if they want to hear about it. It's amazing. And gradually, at the age of 12, she was recognized as Mother Meera. The first time she gave darshan using those particular gestures was at the age of 12. And after that, she was known as Mother Meera.
Beautiful. And who was, and I'm going to pronounce the name wrong, please forgive me, Adi Lakshmi.
Yes. Oh, Adi Lakshmi. Adi Lakshmi is wonderful. Adi Lakshmi met Mother Meera when she was 14 years old. Mr. Reddy, who is the man who discovered Mother Meera, Kamala Reddy, so to speak, brought her to the Aurobindo ashram to be interviewed by the ashram elders. He wanted to share her with the world because she was so amazing. And one of the people Kamala at that time met in Pondicherry at the ashram was Adi Lakshmi Olati, who was a very well-born Indian woman, seeker, who had come to the ashram because she was drawn to spiritual life. And she became Mother's everything, her best friend, her guardian, her bulldog. She taught her to read. Adi Lakshmi was, in certain ways, the mother, sister, aunt, that mother, that a body like a Mother Meera needs in the world to navigate. Mother herself can hardly. Mother herself needs someone like Adi Lakshmi. So she's a very strong and courageous woman. She left her family. She left everything to be Mother Meera's attendant. And I've never seen an example of bhakti like that before, an example of true devotion ever. I've met many seekers. I've met many, people around gurus. The degree of her surrender to God is humbling to see. I'm a doubter. I'm a skeptic. I'm a doubting Thomas. I'm more of a jnani in the yogic system. And so when I see people who truly have bhakti, who truly have that selfless devotion, unquestioning devotion, it blows my mind. It's a beautiful thing to see. It's very mysterious.
Wow. So let's go from there. Thank you for sharing. And speaking of the mysterious, and I want to dive into darshan in a minute. What happened to Kamala on December 12th, 1974?
Is that the day when the light comes into her hands?
Bingo. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing experience. Mother Meera, by the way, just for folks watching this, never talks about these things. She said this to Mr. Reddy, who was her guardian. These experiences are like astrophysics. They truly are. Apparently, she felt the light entering through the tips of her fingers. She said it was like ants crawling in. Then it entered her whole body. It became, her body started to shake. She had various, not conniptions exactly. She had kind of, fits, and it was very hard. It was very hard on her body. And she said this is the first time that the Paramatman light had entered her body so that she could, bring it to others during darshan. And when you read this, it's extraordinary. She says, suddenly her senses were destroyed, and she heard, explosions in her ears like thunderclaps. So, I take her at her word.
Yeah.
This is not a woman who goes around, talking about this kind of thing. She had an amazing transformation on that date. And then it continued for several years, by the way.
And it's fascinating to me. And I was mentioning earlier, Jessica, my wife, the producer, she grabbed this book before I could get my hands on it, and she took one look into Mother Meera's eyes, and and the book just disappeared. And she was talking about how Mother Meera was racked by so much pain during this time, that there were so many physical challenges she went through on her path.
Absolutely. She suffered a lot. Whatever this light was doing to her body, whatever her particular pain was as an avatar, and she makes the point that all avatars, suffer in their own lives, but they don't hold it the way we do. It was agonizing. And it started when she was a little girl. She would have these seizures. She would have terrible fevers. She would shake. In this country, she might have been taken to a child psychiatrist and given, pharmacological drugs. But in her country, that understands that consciousness works in odd ways, and also because her family was so poor that they let her be, and so she was able to evolve naturally. And also, she grew up in a culture that believed that avatars exist.
Can you define for us, as best as possible, what, and it's something you cover later in the book, but since you brought it up now, what is an avatar? And I guess we should distinguish between an avatar and a guru, because she will say to her last breath, "I am not your guru."
She's not a guru. She's not a guru at all. She's not a gurus work their way up from whatever level of ignorance they have, through diligence, through hard struggle and practice, and attain amazing states of awakening. Other people are born in that state. People like Mother Meera, people like Amachi, the great hugging mother, and there are several others Mother Meera says in the world, though she doesn't talk about names. They come into the world fully conscious of their own divinity. Mother Meera says, before coming here, I knew who I was, I knew I would incarnate, and I knew what my work would be. So and when you read the literature, when you look at Ananda Moy Ma, you look at Meher Baba, they're saying the same thing in in 1,000 different voices. I knew who I was before I came here. I come here. I am the same ancient one who returns. So the avatar is the ancient one who returns in different facets, and each facet apparently comes into this world with a particular mission, a particular job to do. It's believed in the Hindu culture that avatars incarnate when humanity is in particular need of spiritual guidance and uplift. So, looking at the world around us, I don't find that hard to
Oh yeah,
figure
we're
out
in need.
why an avatar would show up at this particular moment.
What would she say though is her mission?
Her mission is to bring this light, this Paramatman light, through to humanity using darshan in order to quicken our spiritual practice, raise our consciousness, and bring us closer to healing and unity with God using this particular light. And Mother has made it quite clear that it's, as she says, it's through the light alone that my help comes. So if you meet her on the street, she might seem like an ordinary, short, very tiny, Indian woman with a taste for in beautiful saris, and she has a taste for construction. She likes to do construction and kind of manual labor. She's a unique, very grounded individual, and yet she has this power and access to this power, coming through her. And then when she sits down in darshan, she's transformed. She's actually the same all the time, but she looks different when she's doing darshan. You kind of get, oh, that's who you are. Oh, that's what you're doing here.
So, can you tell us more about darshan? And from what I understand, it's two distinct pieces to it, where she's doing two different things.
Yes, and I'm paraphrasing because it really does, as I said, sound like astrophysics when she describes it. In the first part of darshan, when it's pranam, when you go in front of her with your head down and she touches your temples, she says that there are two white lines running along the back of the human body, and then they join in a red line, and then they come up. Anyway, it's very complicated, but what she's doing is untie. She says in these lines, knots form, and what she's doing is untying knots, the knots that form in our energetic body that bind us and that prevent us from awakening and from enlightenment. So she says that that's what divine personalities do, is that they are untying these knots. You can call them karmic knots. You can call them simply energetic, electromagnetic knots. But that's the gist of what she's doing in the first half. Then she releases your temples. You sit back on your heels and look her straight in the eye. And in that part of darshan, Mother says she's looking at all areas of your being to see where she can be of help. And it's an experience unlike anything you've ever seen before. I don't actually feel anything while she's doing it, but to see her do it, she's in another state. There's no sense that she recognizes you personally. It's fierce. And also people, and that's the funny thing about Mother Meera, people who see her only in darshan think she must be fierce all the time. She's not. She laughs, she's jolly, but in darshan she looks like she's trying to bore through a wall. She's trying to really bore through some hard stuff.
And it sounds like that would be intimidating, to say the least.
You know something? It's only intimidating when you resist it. It's only intimidating when your ego is saying, how am I doing? And what is she seeing? When you surrender, which is what all spiritual practice requires, then it stops being intimidating and you really turn it over. For me, it was very, very hard, being alpha male, a bad childhood with a difficult mother. I mean, every reason not to want to surrender. So for me, the ongoing lesson, and something I struggle with a lot in this book, is that in order to know God, we have to be as children. We have to have that humility. We have to be willing to lay our head down. We have to be willing to say please, and thank you. And it's not all about using the will. And that was really hard for me to get in spiritual life. And yet, if I didn't get that, I couldn't finish this book. I was in a real crisis with this book toward the end.
What was the final crux that helped you? I'm picturing several of my surrender moments. One laying on all this broken glass around me going, I surrender, I surrender. And yet there were still more depths to the surrender to come.
Yeah.
How were you able to move yourself along that path?
I feel like I was moved along it. I don't feel like I moved it.
Yeah.
That what I learned doing this book was that unless I surrendered to God, to life, to the creative spirit, to Mother Meera, whatever you want to call it, unless I did that, I couldn't tell her story honestly. It wasn't happening. There was something not gelling. So I needed to be able to. I needed to learn how to do that. But it happened to me, and it happened like a lot of my spiritual life. I don't know about you, Michael, but it happened out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I had to write this book, and I was very blocked. And what happened is that I had a memory of an experience that I had had that was a traumatic experience. I needed to relive this, and I had a big purging, a big healing, really toward the end of trying to write this book, and that's what opened it up for me, and that's what enabled me to finish it. And it's also when Mother Meera opened up to me and gave me the interview I'd been waiting for, and that's a whole other story.
Oh. How did that come about?
The interview?
Yes.
The interview came about really because I had finally let go of demanding it, wanting it, thinking that I was so important that I was
You'd been trying hard for this.
Oh, my God. Well, I mean, I've interviewed her over the years, but I had needed to interview her for the book. And I thought she had agreed to do it. Then I went to India to work at her school and reminded her beforehand on the phone, I'll be in India. I look forward to it. And when I got to India, Mother Meera would not look at me. She literally didn't look at me. We passed on the stairs. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't speak to me. I went up to her and said, I hope that we'll be able to talk. Yes, I'm busy. She sends me away. I was mortified. So I had a real meltdown, and I got furious, and I was hurt, and I felt abandoned, and all those early childhood things that I had grown up, feeling almost all the time came up to boil, and they had to boil. And when I went through that experience, almost immediately, her back in Germany, a month or two later, her attendant knocks on the door and says, Mother would like to see you now. And I just had this major kind of revelation. And we had a gorgeous interview. I got to ask her everything that I had wanted to. And it taught me a big lesson about trust, because the ego doesn't trust, and so I don't know about you, but as a man, I wasn't exactly brought up to trust. I was brought up to fight and discern and drive the car. So it's been a huge education for me.
Yeah. Every time that I try to get back fully in the driver's seat, I mean, it's a co-creation to me. It's a two-step dance. But every time that I try to grab that wheel and get back in the driver's seat, it's like Mr. Miyagi. There's a 1-2 sweep out of the legs from underneath me, very swiftly.
Then it says that you're pretty evolved if you get it that swiftly, because a lot of people don't. They have to keep going, and they keep get bat down. It never occurs to them, maybe I need to do this differently. Maybe I need to be receptive instead of active all the time.
My wife, she would be more representative of the divine feminine, of that divine love. And so she laughs because she calls it like instant karma. The minute I go off, and she's just like chuckling because she knows you needed that.
You needed that. Yeah, in Buddhism, it's called karma vipaka. It's that karma that hits you right away.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of Mother Meera's essential teachings, because they're so powerful, and I think we can start to apply, even if depth takes a lifetime to fully understand. First off, what is Japa?
Japa is very simple. Japa is the repetition of a divine name. Mm-hmm. Some people call it mantra. In all contemplative practices, from Christianity to Hinduism to Sufism, there is some version of japa, and that's just the repetition of the divine name. It can be Om. Mm-hmm. That touches you into your inner divinity. So when people ask Mother for a foundational practice, that's what she recommends. Of course, the simplest practice you could have, because you understand darshan is given in silence. There's nothing said.
Yeah.
So people were sort of desperate. What can we do? What are we supposed to do? So Mother recommends japa. Yeah, that's the primary practice.
Thank you. And that can be anything. That can be any word that represents God or the divine, spirit, spirituality for us.
That's correct. Whatever you love, she says. Whatever you love, whatever moves. It could be the name of your beloved child, I suppose.
Beautiful. There's a word that you use there, and it kind of ties forward to the next one, which is, I think, critically important. And Jessica would say it was the most important thing in the whole book to her. Use the word desperation. And I think we can use that word desperation with the next one. And the importance of desperation, devotion.
Mm. Devotion is enormous. And Mother talks about not devotion to her ever, but devotion to God, and devotion to the divine. And she says that once we are truly devoted to the divine, there is no separation between action and prayer. And that's why she says she never wants to create ashrams. She said places for people to sit around and think about what they think is God. She said she wants people in the world working, having families, loving others. It's on the job training, and it requires that we remember our devotion to what we love and to the divine.
What does, I'm not recalling the exact words. It's something about having tears when you're separate for the divine. That much of a longing, of a connection, is what's most important.
Well, actually, what she said, and I'm paraphrasing, but we cry for lovers, we cry for a lost house, we cry for a lost job.
Thank you.
When do we cry out of for love of God or longing for God, desire for God? But we'll cry over the Alabama Senate race.
Yeah. What does surrender mean to her?
Well, surrender in the spiritual sense is considered to be the uppermost practice that you could possibly have. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra said that if you have surrender, it's like the noble path to God. You don't need any other practice at all. Surrender in the spiritual sense is to know ourselves as part of God and to be aware humbly of our actual proportion in the universe. When you realize how small you are, and you feel that humility, there's nothing to do but surrender to the ocean that you're a part of. So it's not, surrender is just accepting what is. It's opening to what is. It has nothing to do with resignation or complacency or any of the kind of militaristic ideas of surrender and the white flag at all. It's empowering. And when you surrender, the more you surrender, and this is the mystery of bhakti, the stronger you become. And the closer to God you become, the more awakened you become. Yeah.
I like to say gentle is the new strong.
I love that. Yeah. And I like to say that true strength has fragility in it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Let's
It
talk
does.
Another powerful word that she has, and it's fascinating because you mentioned in her early childhood, at age 8, she was sent on the other side of the wall to become a servant because of her work ethic. And
Yes.
for her, discipline and ego are in a sense inseparable. And that word discipline is so important.
Mother Meera is a worker. She's a farmer's daughter. As I said, you don't find her sitting on a dais, having her feet oiled. She's dragging bags of cement across the driveway and hammering shingles on the roof. And that's what she's about. So yes, she is a worker, and discipline is very important. I mean, discipline comes from the root for disciple. And a disciple is a disciple out of love, right? And to have discipline means to do what we love, to be moving ourselves, in the direction of God. And Mother Meera is not. She's very disciplined herself, enormously, and she does recommend that. She has a very, very strong work ethic. She's quite traditional, actually, in her values, which I appreciate because the trends come and go, but I think discipline is forever. Discipline matters in any sort of practice, whether it's a spiritual practice with religion and God, or it's a spiritual practice of love. You have to keep showing up.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
On that note, if we talk about spiritual practices, one of the things that I use the term pyrotechnics. She talks about spiritual experiences and says, kind of, in Michael's words, to beware the temptation of the pyrotechnics.
Yeah, yeah, this is really big because so many of us, especially in a consumer culture like ours, like I paid for Nirvana, I paid for it. Um, Mother, along with all authentic teachers, warn against taking spiritual experiences too seriously. They're wonderful when they happen. Enjoy them, but they're not meant to last, and they're not an indication of any final enlightenment. They sort of encourage us on the way, but they are dangerous. It's a slippery slope to fall in love with our own experiences and then to make stories about our experiences. Oh, well, that happened and therefore this happened and that's just a head trip. And that's part of why she gives darshan in silence. She said, for the mind to go beyond what it's thinking and what it knows, it requires silence. She warns against conceptualizing, God or spiritual practice.
That is such an important statement there. I'm wondering if you can double back to it. For the mind to go beyond what it knows, it needs silence.
It does. The mind is so brilliant. This human brain is so extraordinarily brilliant. We can't outsmart it. We can't outtalk it. But what we can do is give it silence. And in silence, it comes to rest. And coming to rest, it opens to other dimensions, other voices, other rooms. And that's when we come closer to God. That's when we come closer to an inner experience of union. That's not a thought. It's not something that we figure out. And the mind, of course, as everybody knows, can be such a foe on the spiritual path. They say the mind is an excellent servant, but a terrible master. Most of us are mastered by our minds, and Mother Meera understands that. So she, like Meher Baba, before her, who was also silent, said, we have had enough teachings, we've had enough words, mankind has had enough lessons. What we need now is silence. What we need now is a direct experience of God.
Woohoo! There's another, along those lines, talking about mind. She said something, to paraphrase here, that I was blown away by. Something to do with the fact that mind first and the heart will follow.
Yes, and that was a big surprise for me because I thought it was the other way around.
Yeah.
I thought your heart had to open and then your mind would be convinced. And Mother Meera said, no, the mind is so strong that it can shut down experience. So the mind first has to open to the possibility of spiritual experience before the heart can necessarily feel it. And that's what I meant when I talked about walking out the back door of my own mind, because previously I wouldn't have allowed these experiences to be felt because my head would be I would have the arguments so perfectly lined up, all the reasons why this was BS, and my heart would not have been able to feel it. So I had to open my mind, and that's what meeting her that first time did for me. So I thought, oh, maybe I don't know everything.
Well, the same goes here, that's for sure. So this next question, I wasn't going to ask you about this. I'm like, well, that's been covered in many different ways, and she has a unique take on it. But it started coming out as I'm taking notes. All of a sudden, the all caps key went on, and I hadn't hit it. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I wanted to understand why she doesn't recommend meditation practice for everyone, and especially children under 12.
I don't actually know why. I think it has to do with the developing brain. It has to do with the fact that mother thinks children should be active. She doesn't recommend sort of premature, contemplative practice for a kid. I don't think she'd have any trouble with 10 minutes of mindfulness, the way they do in elementary schools now. But she doesn't recommend meditation for everyone. The same reason she doesn't recommend anything for everyone. Everybody's spiritual temperament is different. Everybody's journey is completely different. There is no right or wrong way. And when you hear her talk about it with such lightness, you realize how attached we get to these forms. Am I doing this the right way? Am I meditating well enough? It's not that important in the eyes of the divine. In the eyes of the divine, it's about kindness and connection and love, and the rest is gravy. to be in our private space practicing for our own personal enlightenment is quite a selfish position to be in sometimes. And that's why Mother recommends doing this work in the family, in the world, and not retreating. Particularly because this is not a moment in history when we can afford to retreat to our caves and do this work. We're needed in the world.
Cave time is over.
Cave time is way over.
There's another important word that goes along just with what you were saying there, the importance of sincerity.
Yes, because there's nothing easier to do than to mimic sincerity, than to mimic, devotion. That has nothing to do with the heart actually being there and available for that experience. And Mother Meera puts great store by devotion, by sincerity. It's much more important to do some more small things sincerely than to make some sort of grand pilgrimage, screaming and kicking. And she says that she feels that when people come to her, she can feel when somebody's going overboard about how much they love her, as opposed to the person who does something small and kind, who opens the door or who. So she's very sensitive to that, and she's a person of very few words, and she's not. Whatever the opposite of ostentatious is, that's Mother Meera. So she's simple, and very often things that are not sincere try to hide it through ostentation, through great and grand shows of how holy we are. We used to laugh in Talheim, in Mother's village, when there was one fellow, and this shows you how unkind we were, but we were human. He was so perfectionist about his sitting and his practice and how he spoke and what he ate, and he was so uptight you could hardly stand being around this guy, and there was this sense that he was doing it for show, that he was very attached to being perceived as a holy guy, as a seriously spiritual guy. There's an opposite to sincerity in that. The spirituality of any genuineness has no interest in what other people think about it. I mean, that's the antithesis of what awakening is about. But he was very, very self-conscious. So we learned something from him. First, we laughed about him because he was really funny looking. But he actually taught me something, at least, about spiritual materialism and the appearance of holiness, which can be such a temptation.
Thank you. Since you're talking about opposites, there's one here, and we've both been through some really trying experience in life, which should build our faith to the max. But I don't know about you, I still have my moments of doubt. It's like a roller coaster ride or a seesaw, and you're going, wait, I should have complete faith now, and yet it still goes on, faith and doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that polarity, that duality is very important in keeping us honest. Somebody asked me that last night during the book launch, actually, about doubt. Doubt is a valuable thing as long as it doesn't stop us from seeking, as long as it doesn't shut our hearts down. To doubt, to be a little bit skeptical of ourselves, I think is a very healthy thing. And that's a bit what Mother Meera is saying around sincerity, is get real. We need to be able to bust ourselves on the spiritual path. And an element of doubt is healthy until we are fully realized. How can we know if this is true until we experience it? I think it's perfectly healthy to have an element of doubt until it's a first-hand knowledge, so that it stays bona fide. It's not just a hearsay or other people's experiences. It's very easy to mimic spiritual experience and to read mystical texts and sort of absorb that and then try and give it out as the real deal. You see it all over the place in the New Age, and so I think it's very important to just trust our own experience.
Thank you. Why does she say, or what does she say is the only real sin, or the only one sin?
Someone asked her about forgiveness, and she said to forgive is human, and someone who doesn't forgive can hardly be called human. I think the only sin is not to love enough. I believe that was the answer to that question.
They're both, actually, you've got it both right. So,
Oh.
so she said, as I have it, she said there's only one sin, not to love enough, and then goes on talking about requires a willingness to forgive. And if we do not forgive, we cannot be called human. Sorry, I was afforded the opportunity to take notes on your book
Oh, right.
before we
But
spoke.
I did almost get it right.
You go,
Almost
I give you an A+ on that one.
the other way around, but yeah. She makes Mother's is adamant and unsentimental, or she doesn't pray. She doesn't flatter our egos. The basic message is get over yourself. Be kind. If you can't do that, you have no business talking about astral light and auras. If you can't be kind to your loved ones, the people around you in the world. So she does. She's very clear on that and very simple.
What did she say about fear?
She says fear is there. She says she rarely feels fear when people ask her. She was always, from a child, very fearless. She would go she'd wander in the jungle by herself at night. They'd find her in the morning. She'd be asleep in like a crook of a tree. She has never been particularly fearful herself, and she recommends with fear, like with all destructive emotions, not to take them too seriously. And I think psychologists go a little crazy with this idea not to take your emotions too seriously, because we live in such an emotion crazed culture where our emotions are everything. For Mother Meera, they're not so important. So notice that the fear is there, she would say, and don't let it stop you. That would be the basic message.
One of the things that struck both Jessica and myself is that even Mother Meera experiences anger.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not like our anger. And I learned that in India. No, when she senses that money is being wasted that should be going to the poor children that she opened the school for, when she senses that right is not being done, that some injustice, or she's trying to work and people are not listening to her, she'll have a fiery moment. But it's like Kali. It comes, she asks for what she wants, or she makes her point, and then it passes. And then she's laughing in the next minute. It's not personal. It's truly not personal. And that's a hard thing for the ego to get. And I've seen a lot of people, myself included, suffer for it because we take it so personally. Gosh, I saw a woman. I felt so bad for her. She was a woman, probably on the team of volunteers at the school. She was the one who was trying hardest to get everything right. And one day, mother criticized her for what she wasn't doing during recess. The kids were going crazy, and the woman just fled in tears. And Mother wasn't being cruel. She was simply saying, "You're not doing your job." And we were talking earlier about discipline and doing your job. This woman was kind of slacking off, and the sword of Kali came down. And said, anyway, I felt so bad for the woman. But Mother's not here, as I said, to flatter our egos or to make us feel better. We're supposed to be on the same side doing this work. And if we're at her school, for example, in that scene, we're there to make an environment for these children, and everything else is secondary.
What would you say is the most important takeaway you got of your last visit with her?
Well, trust. What I said about trust, because my last visit with her was that fantastic interview that we had in Germany as I was finishing the book, and it was a huge blessing and a huge gift. I'd been waiting for months and months and months, and it was given to me when I stopped craving, when I stopped. You talked about desperation.
Attachment.
When I stopped being so attached, that's when the knock came on my door and it said, "Mother is ready to see you now." And so it happened in such a mysterious way. But what for me the takeaway was that in my experience was that when I had let it go, and I'd burned through all the reasons that I was stomping my feet and having this temper tantrum, that's when she opened to me. And I think that's what life is doing to us all the time. If we stop our temper tantrum and start to listen and trust a little bit, then life surprises us. It's funny, right now as we're having this conversation, I'm looking at a piece of art on the wall in my friend's house. "Drift, wait, and obey," it says. There's something about that. Just trusting.
I like it. What would she, if she was here today, what would be the one thing that she would want for us more than anything else?
Love God. Love God. Serve others. Be kind. It's very simple. That would be what she wanted. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be a complicated explanation about Paramatman light or about about the Kundalini. It would be love God, remember God. What we were saying earlier about crying, we cry for everything, but we never cry for the love of God. I think that's what she would have us do, is feel the longing and not forget that longing in our hearts. It's so easy to take a back seat, with the exigencies of life. Life can take over and we can easily forget our source. So what Mother Meera and people like her are here to do is remind us of our source. And that's what she would say very simply, is remember God.
Thank you. Would she be also saying that God is also within?
She would. Yeah, she would. Absolutely.
Thank you. So I want to take my coach's hat as we start to wind things down here. I want to take my coach's hat off, put it on you, Mark, and I don't want people leaving here today without having homework, and actionable, something that they can take action on today. What one homework assignment would you give people?
Well, because I teach writing as a path of self-inquiry through my methods called Writing to Awaken.
We have an automatic writing book coming out this spring, so you and I are
Great.
simpatico here.
Yes, this is a little different from automatic writing because it's using writing to targeted questions as a path of self-inquiry. And so what I would ask people, I would recommend is folks to write 1,000 words, no more. That's four single, double-spaced pages, or writing by hand, about 4 pages. What is the nature of your faith? And what is blocking you from full awareness of your source and your connection to God? Where are the shadows? So what's the nature of your faith? What do you believe in? What do you believe about this? And then what's preventing you, shadowing you? Where are the knots in your sadhana and your being that prevent you from opening to God and being receptive to God? That would be a great writing to do, and you would learn a lot about your soul's journey in doing that.
Beautiful. And then I'm guessing you would recommend that they go back and review that afterwards.
Absolutely, yeah. I recommend waiting till the next day, going back and rereading, and then notice what you've left out. Notice where you're covering up. Notice where you say something intriguing and then skitter away. Notice where you were too afraid to go. Because faith touches on our deepest beliefs about our existential reality. Faith touches on mortality. It touches on the things that are most precious to us. So it can be quite scary. So where do you feel blocked? Where do you feel closed down? How do you feel about freedom? That's an inherent question in the one that I just put. How do you truly feel about freedom? Because we talk about freedom like it's such a walk in the park. Freedom comes with demands. Are you really truly willing to be free in your life? What would you have to change for that to happen? What kinds of choices would you have to make in your life? That can be quite frightening for the ego.
Brilliant. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jessica always wants me to ask a question for parents and their kids just before the end. What would Mother Meera want parents to know for their kids?
I think Mother Meera would, and I'm not speaking for Mother Meera, but from what I've observed, let your children be children. Let them be kids. Don't try to create little adults prematurely. Don't make them too competitive or worried about their careers at too young an age. Let them spend time in nature. Let them be let them be in the quiet. Allow your children to develop in as organic a way as possible, and give them discipline. Once again, discipline. Kids get disciplined at mother's school in India. They don't get away with anything.
I heard about an earlobe or two.
Yeah, the earlobe. When I saw Mother Meera herself take a child by its earlobe out of, that was a first. I never thought in my life I'd see this. It was great. There was this little kid. I was helping the kindergartners, and he was being a brat, and he was making noise, and he was disrupting. And from out of nowhere, Mother Meera. First, I heard this voice come from on high saying, "You there in the back, stop it!" And so he stopped. And then later in the afternoon, he was doing the same thing. And she appeared out of nowhere and she took him by his earlobe and she dragged him out in the back and probably gave him a talking to. I've never seen anything like it.
That's funny. So on that note, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Probably what we're doing right now, which is having spiritual dialogue, is the thing I love better than anything. I have a group called the Seekers Forum, which is an online community, global online community that's dedicated to doing to the spiritual talk of friends and sharing our deepest questions. That for me is my life's blood. That's what I love more than anything. I could easily have said writing, because writing is my passion, it's my vocation. But at the end of the day, even if I couldn't write, as long as I could have heart-sharing moments like this, then I would be sustained. So this is the most important thing for me. Especially in today's world, Michael, today's world, we need to be able to talk at a deeper level. Otherwise, it can be so demoralizing looking at what's going on politically.
Amen. I call this candy. That's what it feels like to me.
Candy, good. Good.
So you mentioned your group, so it's the perfect segue. Where can people go to find out more and to find this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book?
Oh, well, it is a beautiful book. They did such a gorgeous job, Random House. Well, they can, of course, find this book on on Amazon, or you can go to the Random House site or buy it wherever books are sold. Folks can reach me on my website, markmatousek.com, or at theseekersforum.com. Theseekersforum.com, that's all one word. That's my global online community, and I give a talk every month, and we have just a wonderful group, about 700 people around the world, and we have wonderful conversations.
Fantastic. That was theseekersforum.com, if I'm right?
Yes, correct.
So if you didn't catch theseekersforum.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com, and we'll get you over to Mark Matousek at theseekersforum.com.
Great.
So thank you so much, Mark. Before I ask before we do a really brief meditation, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
Have hope. Have hope that the world is going to is in a process of evolution. It's not the end, and that out of destruction does come creation. And it's not enough to look around and just throw your hands up in the air or say boo-hoo, it's all over, like a lot of the nihilists I know are doing. It's not enough. The fact is there is great hope. There's great inspiration here, and that we have to keep showing up. And that would be my best advice to anybody.
Woohoo! Would you have time for a brief meditation of your calling?
Sure. Absolutely.
Whatever you'd like. And if you're going to be closing your eyes, everybody do this after you've parked the car.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, remove whatever you might have on your lap. Gently close your eyes. Take a couple of deep breaths in and out through the nostrils. Dear God, may we know ourselves as part of you. May we love one another as part of you. May we bring the world along us on the path of light. And may we come to know ourselves while there's still time. Amen.
Woohoo! Thank you, Mark. This has been
my pleasure.
Such a treat.
Thank you, Michael. Me too. I've loved it.
Woohoo!
All right.
My job is done then.
Mine too.
So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get Mother of the Unseen World, and begin diving into the unknown today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. I didn't mean to end the prayer on such a fatalistic note, but that's what came.
I'm looking at it from an optimistic point of view.
Oh, good.
Always, always, always. And I think this gives hope to people today. I really, truly believe this gives hope to people today.
I hope so. You're doing great work in the world.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!